Hey, what's up guys? Really excited to be doing this. This is the third demonstration video that I've done, and we're out here. It's a beautiful early spring morning. We're going to be doing a scene of a creek, and we've got, I'm trying a different setup this time. I had a viewer of mine say, suggest that maybe we do some filming from the right side, and then that way I can stay out of the way as I don't have to keep walking back and forth. So I thought, hey, that sounds like a good idea, so I'm going to be trying that. If you've been following the videos, you know that in video number 1 I talk a lot about my materials, so if you want to know exactly what I'm using as far as my materials, you can go back and watch that if you haven't already. But this is just a medium. It's my mixture of Galkyd and Gamsol paint thinner. And we're using the got my brush washer with the Gamsol paint thinner in it, and we're using 6 colors: cadmium red light, cadmium yellow light, ultramarine blue. These are our vibrant primaries, and we've got burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and ivory black, which are our earth tone primaries. So red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, and blue. And another thing we want to make sure we do before we start is we're going to take a little bit of this medium mixture here and just put a few drops. Now I can't really get too much mixed in here because it'll slide right off the palette, but I'm just going to whip up the white paint a little bit. So you want to put that medium in there and get it, soften up that paint so it's nice and soft. You want it to have a nice consistency. Sometimes when you're painting outside, there's a tendency for the paint to get a little stiff if it's cold outside, and some paint just comes out of the tube a little stiffer than others. So you want to whip up that white paint. It's going to make it a lot easier for the paint to flow into it later on. And we're going to tone our canvas, and I'll show you. I've been using straight ivory black for this tone in the last 2 videos, but I'm going to mix it just a little bit with the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna today to make just a slightly warmer tone. And this is something that you can experiment with. These 3 colors are great for staining your canvas, so you can play around and make different colors. Well, before I get started here, I want to give a shout out. We got our first patron over on the Patreon page, so I really appreciate it. Michael, if you're watching, thanks so much. We really appreciate the support. And if you want to go check out the Patreon page, and I'll put the link in the description down below. So. Alright, so just like in the other videos, I'm going to be starting off with just a general dark. Now, I talked a little bit about this before. When you come out to paint, try to find some big shapes. So in other words, you don't want to try to get 100 little creek rocks in front of you and then paint them. We want to start off with broad, simple shapes of some basic colors. So when I look out here, I see there's a little creek that leads my way to these little buildings, and then we've got a nice blue sky. So I don't want to get too zoned in on any one spot. I want to kind of get these big shapes coming together, like the creek, the sky, the grass, the buildings, the trees. So just a few big shapes. And to do that, I'm going to start off with just my go-to dark. And this is this process that we're doing with just these paper towels. You want to wad up your paper towel. If you've watched the other videos, you know this is how I want you to start. And this is just basically to get you to be thinking about big shapes and not so much doing a lot of detail right in the beginning. So another good thing at this point is to try to imagine what you want your painting to look like when it's done, so that I can kind of see, you can kind of see where things go on the canvas. So I'm going to try to stay out of here as much as I can so that my shadow's not on this. But I want to figure out where I want these trees in the background. So I have them right here. And you want this to be thin at this point. We don't want it to be too dark. We've got this. There's a big pine tree. I don't know if you can see it in the video. Yeah, I guess you can. You can kind of see it goes up over here. So we want that right there. And At this point, it's really good to just squint your eyes down until they're almost closed. This will really help you see the big shapes. This tree comes up here. And so this is where the buildings are going to be. And this is going to be our center of interest. So notice that I'm careful not to put it directly in the center of the painting. We want to have an area that is sort of the area that, the most important area in the painting. You kind of want to have this in your mind when you first start. The geese are going crazy. I'll be competing with them, but they'll be over here trying to peck at me here in a minute. Watch. But anyway, the center of interest. You want to have this in your mind of what's this painting about. Well, for me, I love the way the creek leads your eye into this bright sunlit area right up here with these buildings. So that's what I'm going to focus on. So I want to have that in my mind. So I'm going to start right in here. Just kind of pick out a couple little shapes. There's the roof of this one building, so I'm going to go ahead and pop that in. So I'm not doing a lot of drawing, just some big basic dark shapes. And then there's a dark over here, and we've got some trees that come up behind this building. We'll leave that light there for the roof of that building. So now we've got that light area there. Now our creek, we can just kind of sketch in real quick the shape of the creek. And I talked about this before in another video. If you're wondering about perspective lines, easiest way to do it is you take a brush like this and you hold it up and you just catch that angle of whatever the line is that you're trying to do, and then if you just bring it down to your canvas, you can kind of see. So on the right side of the creek, if I hold it up here, I can see that it's a lot more steep of an angle. More almost, closer to being a straight up and down line. So right there, so I can just sketch in that side of the creek right there. And so we're already starting to get some perspective in there. And now my creek is reflecting the sky, so that's going to be a light area. The sky is going to be a light area. And I'm going to call the grass part of my darks just right now, because even though the sunlight is hitting them, I want this to make sure that this creek is nice and light, and I want to make sure the sky is nice and light. So really want to pay attention at this point is, how dark or how light are things. So we're not going after color. The color comes later, and this is an important thing because it's like building a foundation for a house. You wouldn't try to put up the windows without putting up the foundation first. So this is really building a foundation for us to build the painting on. I added a little bit of black there, and a little bit more ultramarine. This is just going to make a darker dark. So that's the next step. After we put in those initial darks, we want to come back inside those shapes and pick out some areas that are even darker. And these are going to be some shapes that lead you into the composition. So I'm going to start with this pine tree over here. And see, I can add a little bit more blue if I want this to be more of a cool tone, which this shadow over here is kind of a nice cool color. It comes out on the grass there. And for these darker darks, it's okay if you get a little bit thicker now, that you don't have to dip into your medium as much. And that's going to make them a little bit more opaque, and they're just going to have a little bit more dark to them. So. Some windows right in there, suggest them. And there's actually some dark pine trees. Again, I want to restate some of these pine trees. And there's not too many darks back here because this is sort of a distant ridge, so there's not going to be a lot of darks right there. But there will be some little darks right in here. There's some buildings back in there. And then I want to pay attention to right along where the water meets the grass, because there's some little shadows in there. And there's this dark tree here is actually reflected down in the creek, so I'm gonna go ahead and just brush in a value. same dark color. Just put it down in there just to get the sensation of the impression of a reflection in there. So. Okay, so what we have now is kind of like a map. So we do our basic darks with just the Ultramarine, Burnt Sienna. Just kind of map them in, and you want to come back in with some darker darks. Now the next step is going to be some local color, which is the big broad areas of color. We're not going to focus too much on bright, vivid colors. We'll save those for the very end of the painting. But at this point we want to focus on, well, it's the grasses. There's an overall green to the grass. And I'm going to mix this with my bright yellow and my bright blue. And so you have different options. You can mix a dull green by using these duller, I'm calling this blue, it's really ivory black, but it's an earth tone. When you put it up against these warmer colors, it tends to go towards a cool bluish tint. You can you can make a very vibrant green with these two, or you can make a duller green with these two, or you can make any level of intensity in between by mixing them together. So I'm going to add a little bit of these just to dull this down a little bit. A little bit more yellow ochre, just to warm it up just a little bit. So that's kind of the color I'm looking for right there. And make sure you're putting enough of this onto your paper towel. You want to make sure that it comes off the paper towel and that you're not just wiping paint away. So now real quick, this is where you want to get in there and use that energy. You want to paint, try to paint a little faster than you can think, just a little bit, and this will keep your work fresh and spontaneous. And you can see them going back in and sort of adjusting the color as I go, just to get different, a little bit of variation in it at this stage. We don't want to break it up too much, but a little variation can't hurt. Some hints of green right, maybe a little bit too bright. Some hints of green right along here. The yellow is a very vibrant color that comes forward. So you want to watch when you have yellow on that you're not painting anything too far in the distance. You want to keep your yellows forward. I'm going to make a little bit of a duller green here. And we use this to paint some of these little pine trees back here. So I'm going to do the local color now. In the creek, the majority of the creek is this a light blue color, and I think you can see in the video. Yeah, you can see that it's it represents kind of the color of the sky, but it's a little bit darker. So these are the little differences that you want to pay attention to. And when you're painting, try to find a shady spot to set up in. I'm painting in the sun right now just so that you can see all the canvas, the color on the canvas, but it can make it difficult when you're first starting out to judge your values on your paintings, how dark and how light things are. So I would suggest finding a place where you can have both your easel, your canvas, and your palette in the shade. And they make umbrellas that clamp on. If you look up easel umbrella, painting umbrella, you'll see there's all kinds of wonderful umbrellas that clamp on and fold in different directions. So I'm going to make this blue, and it's got a little bit of green to it. So I want to start with a warm color, and I do this a lot. I start with my yellow, and then I'm going to add blue to it, which blue is a cooler color. I'm going to make a nice green, then I got to add white to it, of course, so I can see what color it is. And I don't want this to be too light, because if it's too light, my sky won't read. So I got to make sure that it's not going to compete with my sky. That's probably close to what I want. So I'm just going to, just real quickly, just brush it in there. Again, I want you to go after these big shapes of color. And there's hints of it back in here, just little bits where it would lead your eye back into the distance there. And then there's also, I see like a purplish color right along the edge of the creek. It's where the sky reflection starts to meet the reflection of the grass. So I'm going to go into my Cad Red light and Ultramarine blue and right back into that same pile. And then it's just a little bit darker, and that's what we want. And so I'm judging that color. I'm looking up there and saying, I see it's a little bit more purple and it's a little bit darker. So just remember, it's equally as important, if not more important, to think about how dark or how light an area is compared to how colorful or what color it is. So keep all that in mind. Now for these reflections down here, there's a nice dull green color. So I'm going to make it by using Ivory, black, and yellow ochre. And this is a lot darker because it's not reflecting the sky, it's reflecting the pine trees. And then there's some reflection of some of this brush on the bank, so I can use that same color for that. Okay. And then the trees, they have a local color that's sort of a little bit more pinkish purple than what I've got right now. So I'm going to come back in, I'm going to mix up using Cad Red light and Ultramarine blue, a nice purple. I'm going to add white to it so I can see what color. Now, so a lot of these colors are dark when you first mix them, and then you have to add white to them just to see what you got. I'm adding just enough Cad Red to make it sort of a pinkish color. And then, just real quick, you want to spend a lot of time making sure that the value is correct. And then once you get it on your brush or on your paper towel, then be spontaneous with how the paper towel moves. Okay. So you see, we're not overdeveloping anything at this stage. We're just trying to get some basic colors in there. And this is what I'm going to teach you to do in these beginner classes, these beginner demos, is I'm going to get you to just learn how to take your painting to a certain degree of finish, which is just kind of the basic laying in these big broad shapes. So it's going to be a real impressionistic approach, but it's really fun because it teaches you to get away from the idea that you need to put all these details in, or that you need to exactly copy what's out in front of you. The most important thing you want to remember is that ultimately the goal is the painting. It's not about the subject matter. So you're creating something different and equally as exciting as nature. You're not trying to make a copy of nature. So we want to play with these ideas of leaving some areas unfinished. And what that does is it lets the viewer of the painting play a role in interpreting it, so their imagination gets to participate a little bit. And that's what I love about Impressionism. I'm not giving you all the facts, so it takes a little bit of an engagement with the piece to really appreciate it. And I think that's the fun part of what this is all about. So. All right, so. We're going to go, I want to do my lights now. So we got darks, darker darks, local colors, and then our lights. Now when I look out there, I see several areas that are light. Obviously the sky is light. We actually have, just like in the previous video, we have some areas out here that are light too, that are where sunlight is on a building. And in fact, this area right here there's some sunlit buildings that are actually brighter than the sky. So that's very important, because what I want to do is make sure that my sky value is going to be dark enough that these are going to pop when I put them in. So I'm going to go ahead and get the sky value in there first. And we're going to do the same two colors that we used for the creek color, the blue in the creek. It's just cad yellow light and ultramarine blue, and then white. And we want to get enough yellow in this that it takes on that nice green color first, and then we can add more blue as we go. So, and you'll notice that this green color is down in near the horizon, and as it comes up towards the zenith of the sky, you're going to get more red introduced, which is going to make the blue look more blue or more purple all the way up at the top of the sky. So keeping that in mind, as I work across the painting, I want to use this green for everywhere where the sky is going to be along the horizon here. So, and watch how I can cut back into my tree here. This is called painting with negative shapes, and I did this a lot in the first video. So I'm going to come right back with my sky color right over top of the tree value here, the tree shape, and actually draw with the sky color so that I'm leaving little areas where I want tree branches. And now I'm going to add more blue to darken it up just a little bit. And so I'm going to come in with this blue right above here. I'm going to leave a space. You see how I do this? So I've got the green and I've got the blue, and I'm leaving a space, and I'll show you why here in just a second. Okay, so now I left that space, and I'm going to come back with sort of a clean rag, and I'm going to take this green up into the blue, and I'm going to pull the blue back down into the green, but I'm going to do it real fast. Watch. So we're blending on the painting itself rather than mixing on the palette. Alright, now we're going to make another color that's just add more blue to it. It's going to get darker. Add more ultramarine blue, and we're going to do the same thing. Put it up here. Make sure you have enough paint on the rag. And put it up here. Come back with a clean paper towel and right across. I'm going to get a little bit more paint on there. Just blend it down. Now see, so my sky looks nice and bright here, but it's not so bright that I don't have room to expand. I can really pop in some lights down here where these buildings are now, and you'll see how it'll start to look like sunlight. So for this, I'm going to take just some, I want these colors to be very bright, so I'm going to take some cad yellow light, and I want to make sure I don't get any green into this. So I'm take a new, when you get to this point when you're doing your lights, you want to make sure you're not contaminating the colors too much. So I'm going to take a little bit of this cad yellow light, way over here, and maybe just a touch of this yellow ochre, just to kind of tone it down just a little bit. And then I'm going to look up there and figure out where I want this side of this building, and I'm just going to real carefully just pop it in. And we're also getting some sunlight on the side of the building too, which is going to be like right in here. So I'm just going to pop that in. And then we've got another building behind there, and I'm going to use some burnt sienna and yellow ochre and make a slightly duller color, but we're still going to be a light value. So, and I need to be a little lighter than that. So you can test stuff out and readjust it. So. Okay. And then the next building back there is a brick building. So I'm going to make a nice, I'm going to go cad red light, cadmium red light, and cad yellow light, and make a nice sort of an orangish color. And then I'm just going to come right across here and go right over those windows. I'll come back and paint them in here in just a second. And that might be a little bit too bright So I'm going to take a little bit of this darker green color and just kind of work it right into that. Just to tone it down, just a tad. And then we hit up, there's a real nice green, a real nice light green color on the roof where the sunlight's hitting that big roof right there, so just like that. And this is where the paper towel is going to force you to think in big broad shapes. I'm not going to be able to get in there and get every single detail, and that's good because we want to get away from trying to make a coloring book and then filling it all in. I'm going to go back in with some darks again at this point, and just do a little bit more detail with the, I'm going to pinch this paper towel together, and so we can just get like some smaller little shapes in here for windows, and there's a roof here. And a lot of times I can use colors that are already on my palette for this if I see, you know, there's something close, and that'll help keep similar colors throughout the piece. Okay, so we're getting out the paintbrushes. White bristle brushes. I use flats and filbert shapes. I want you to use big sizes, so nothing smaller than a 6, number 6. So this is a number 10. This is a number 6. And we want to start with the biggest brushes, and we're going to come back in. And I'm going to start again, I'm going to mix this dark color. I'm going to mix burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. This is a great dark. You can lean it towards burnt sienna if you want it to be a warm dark. In this case, that's what I want because I'm going to be painting some shadows along the creek bed right here. And I want to start near my center of interest because we want to develop the most amount of detail around this area. As things fade away from the center of interest, we can make them a little looser, and that's going to give your picture a nice sense of how we really see. Because if we stare at one spot, and for example, if you take your eyes away from the screen right now and you look at something in the room, and you focus on one spot in the room, chances are you won't be able to really see just a couple inches to the left or the right of that spot without shifting your eyes. So it's amazing how small of a spot we can actually see. So I try to think about that when you're really taken in by something. Chances are you stare right at one spot, it all hits you, and it's the first impression. So that's what we're trying to do. So that's why we want to, in a sense, you're sort of emulating the concept of peripheral vision by keeping all your details in the center of interest area. So hope that made some sense. That was a lot. But you'll see what I mean when you get out and you actually set up and paint and you discover this stuff for yourself. That's when it really sets in. I mean, I can you know, only tell you so much, but you know what I'm saying is basically just like there's you know, the moon analogy. You know, somebody can point to the moon, and the teaching is more like the finger, showing you how to go to the moon, but it's not the moon itself. So think of these lessons as the finger pointing to the moon, but when you get outside and you actually set up and paint, that's when you're actually there experiencing it. So I'm popping in some of these little shadows, and I'll teach you something here. Watch how you can step a creek back. You don't want to do too many slanted lines on the side of a creek bed because it's going to make it look like your water is going to just slide right off. So instead of slanting lines, I do a series of straight horizontal lines to describe the creek bank. I'm going to come back and kind of give a little shape to these buildings. I'm mixing up an orange here because there's some nice reflected light under the eave of that building right there. So I want that nice orange color. And the trick of this is making sure that it's orange, but it's not too bright. So it's right in there. And we also have those roofs have a green color to them. I actually don't think I'm going to put the green color in on these roofs. I think I'm going to leave them a different color, and I'll decide that here in a second, just because I don't want to have green, 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 green. I want a little bit of variation. So I might even make it a red roof. That would really pop out right there. And we can go ahead and test that out and see how it looks. So I'm just going to mix up a nice red. Now the sunlight is hitting this roof, so I do want it to still be a bright color. Yeah, I think that works nicely. Really brings out the contrast nicely with all these cool colors. And just because I don't want that red to be so isolated, I'm just going to pop in a couple, and this doesn't really matter exactly what this is. It could be little pieces of farm equipment or just something out there. And a lot of times I say this, it's funny, basically it's just a spot of color to help with your composition. So, and I'm going to come back in here with my dark and suggest a couple fence posts in this area right in here, just to start to pull your eye in. And then right where this building meets the ground, there's like a little dark shadow. And I want to work some brighter greens in the grass right around the buildings. And this is something you'll see a lot with this kind of subject matter, is that the grass will be better manicured right around a building, and then as you step out from the building, you'll get into a little bit of a thicker grass. So just like a putting green is going to be a brighter green because it's thinner and more manicured, so when you have cut grass, it's generally a little bit lighter than uncut grass. So this works to our advantage because having these brighter colors right near our center of interest is going to help pull your eye into that area. Now, the reason I want this creek to be kind of a zigzag through here is because look at this nice S shape. I don't know if you can see that really starting to develop here, but it's kind of a nice, and I instinctively do this when I pick out compositions, and it's something that you can look for in nature. If you can find a big shape of an S, whether it be the clouds coming down this way, and then a mountain, and then a road, that always makes for a really nice composition, because it gives your eye something to kind of weave around and really take a stroll through the painting. So there's some nice dark red brush, maybe some briars or something right in here. And then I'm just going to echo that color. I'm going to mix it in with a little blue so it's a little bit more purple and almost the same value, and just sort of echo it right down in here. It starts to give you the sense that you're seeing a reflection down here of what's happening up here. So, there's also a nice, like a sandy color where there's some dead grass, some nice little spots of light color right in here along the bank. So and I can even come back with a nice light, sort of a warm color. This is like a grayish, sort of a grayish beige or rose color. It's going to be a great color for clouds. It's just a hair lighter than the sky. And you don't want to get too, you don't want to brush them in too much because they'll start mixing with the blue of the sky. But just real quick, just You see how I'm holding my brush now? I'm not holding it like a pencil. I'm not getting all up in here. I'm holding it back, and I'm using this motion of my arm to suggest the movement of those clouds. That's a little bit too. Okay, so now what I want to do too is there's a just a hint of a little bit of a distant mountain way back in here, so I'm going to just brush in a little bit of blue. So now we're layering up our areas, so we're stepping the landscape back. That just creates another layer going back. And you'll see too as I go that kind of what I do is I work in some big shapes, and then I break them up into smaller shapes. So you can think of it like that, big shapes to smaller shapes. So for example, we have this big area right here of green now. I want to come back in with some of this warmer color that we were using. This nice sort of a reddish brown, which I'm going to make burnt sienna, a little red, and just a touch of this ultramarine blue. And I'm going to break this area up. And I want to do it with shapes that'll lead you in towards the center of interest. So, okay, I'm not just going to look out there and copy what's out there. I'm going to see if I can use what's out there and sort of. So, to do that, I want to put a big shape here. So you see how it grabs your eye and pulls you here. Now watch, your eye will jump from this color to the same color when it sees it in another place of the painting. So if I take it right here and I go there and maybe a little over here. So now your eye says, okay, so I'm going to go here and then I'm going to jump in here. So I'm pulling you in towards the center of interest. Now I want to lighten the shadow here that's cast on this building. It's a little bit too dark. So I'm just going in and making a real nice bright, it's dark, but it has some color to it. So it's a blue, ultramarine blue. I'm going to hit that right there. And then there's also some little downspouts and areas that are catching some light right in here. So I'm going to hit some. This is just going to help pull your eye into this area a little bit more, just some real bright areas right in there. Get rid of my lines there. And so watch how we can make some trees without the leaves on them by and I did this in the other videos too, just scrub it in there. You just take that purple color and then you want to kind of just put it in. Sometimes I call them what's called make like an upside down triangle shape. A little upside down triangle. You see how that starts to suggest like that there's all kinds of branches up there. So, and then watch how we can weave that sky back into it. So I want to make something that's close to the color that's back behind the tree. And you might already have that color still on your palette. And then I can just cut right into that. Just do a little detail there, just some lines like that, just to pull your eye in a little bit more. I'm going to go back into some green now, and there's some little plants that are growing right along the edge of the creek that are very bright green, new growth. And because these shapes of brighter green are small shapes, they are suggesting that the creek's going way back into the distance here. I'll show you. If I take a green, let's say I make a nice green here, and I do like come up here and do this shape. These are big shapes. If I take a green and I come back here and do the same thing, but they're smaller shapes. You guys hear any geese? Yeah, me neither. Alright, so we're gonna put some chimneys up. Again, look, I didn't get in there and draw a big chimney. I just, just a spot of color. So that's what we want to be thinking about. Now these windows are trimmed in white, so instead of trying to paint the trim around, I'm just going to paint the white first. And then I'm going to come back with a dark, and it can be ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And I'm going to pop the windows in. So you get the sense that there's a trim, there's detail, but you don't have to get in there and paint every single pane and all, window pane and all that stuff. So there's this little building back here has a shape like that. And then we've got some little details here around this. This is like a carport area right here. So we want to suggest there's a post right here, and then this. And there's some sunlight hitting a little flat area right down here. Something like that. Okay. Now I want to try to straighten up. I can see that this building's leaning, and I don't want it to lean so much. So I'm going to take a dark line here and just kind of shape up the roof. It's sort of an old building, so it can lean a little bit. I'm going to do some lines here on the roof too, just to kind of suggest the shape of that roof. And I've got an area right here that I need to look at, and I've got an area right down here I need to attend to, and then I'm probably going to stop because I want you to get in the habit of just taking these paintings to a certain point and then being okay with letting them go for a little while, and you can work more on developing them after you get the hang of just basically laying in some big broad basic shapes, because there's a lot to think about when you start developing a painting more. And that can all be learned in time, but the first step is learning the big shape stuff. And if you don't learn that stuff, then anything you do after that is not really going to make any sense, because you're not going to have the foundation for just laying in some big broad shapes. Now I'm just going to play with some spots of color. There's like some little things back here. There's a dumpster and there's a little car, but I'm not trying to paint cars. I'm just using these as little notes of color to move your eye around the painting. There's some really nice dark blue little ripples here in the water, so I'm just going to pop them in. And I can use these areas in the water to step your eye back, just like we did with the green on the side of the water. We can take this dark blue and just do it a little smaller back here. I might have to put out some more blue. Just make them a little smaller back in there. So again, we're just stepping your eye into the picture. going to get a little creative here and use just make up some little fence posts right here along the creek side that help pull your eye into the picture too. And I'm going to do it the same way, just basically stepping back by making them smaller as they go back into the distance. And then I want to fill in this shape back here with there's some little pine trees and stuff back there, but what we're mostly concerned about is right here. So we're just leaving all this kind of sketchy. I'm going to take a bluish gray color that's very light in value. The same amount of lightness as this yellow that we used for the house. I'm going to come back right over top of the yellow with the blue. And once that's just going to create a little bit of color vibration, because we've got the yellow and the blue and they're very close in value. So it just kind of creates a little bit more vibrancy in that area. And let's see, I'm going to make sure I've got this dark enough down here. Sometimes you can forget to paint to the edge, or when you're doing that with a paper towel, you don't always get to the edge, so make sure that I'm doing that. I'm just going to bring a little bit of this blue color over into here, like maybe a puddle there. So I'm half, I'm using what's out there, but I'm also taking things into my own hands and changing things if I need them to be changed. So. And even though there's a good example of that is like right now there's not any windows or doors on this building right here on this side, but I do want something there. I want like a little door or something, because I don't want just that big broad shape. So I'm going to put a little door in right here. And then maybe a little window, and we can do the window the same way we did with the other building. We can do the big light shape first. Come back, clean our brush out. You can clean your brush as you go in your brush washer. In fact, I recommend it because you don't want to get your colors too mixed up. And right back in there like that. And then maybe even here we got some green shutters on that side. Put some little, there's like some little posts over here and little trees. And then last but not least, I'm going to put a little figure in, and we want to. They're going to be wearing bright red. That'll help pull your eye in here. So I'm going to do just a bright red. I'm just using this number 6 brush, but I'm getting a blob of paint on the end of it. And then I'm using just the corner to paint the little shapes here. These figures, I mean, there's not an exact science to them. You can do them a couple different times and see, do it. If you don't like it, you can wipe it back out. But a lot of times you want to put on little blobs of color, and then you can come around with some color around them and shape them up. And it might be nice. Sometimes it's nice on a nice day like today to put, there's a couple figures out there. So. Make a nice warm tone for the face. These are just little tiny spots of color. You can't really see them. I know you can't see too well in the video that what I'm doing here, but you'll see when I zoom in at the end. Don't be afraid to scoop up a lot of paint. I mean, you want a lot of paint on your paintbrush. You need a lot of paint on your palette to do that, so you just got to lay it out and put it on there. So there's little bits of sunlight hitting there. And there's actually a little road back here, so I'm just going to real quick just kind of give a little suggestion of that. And then I'm going to take, this is what's called a transition color, where I take between the shadow and the light, I'm going to take a value that's just a little lighter than the shadow, but a little darker than the light. And in this case, I'm going to use an orange color. And I'm going to go right between the shadow and the light, just to kind of break that up a little bit. And come back and soften that a little bit. I want to try to shape up the edge of this house right here, so I'm taking a dark color right in here. Just come down and draw the edge of that. The geese are just having a time this morning, aren't they? Sound like they're having a party. And last but not least, I know I keep saying that, I think I said that already. So this is the tricky part. You really don't want to overwork anything. You just want to try to figure out what it is that the painting needs, and you don't want to add anything that it doesn't. So I just want to put a little bit more purple, sort of break up that orange warm color right in there. A little bit more purple right there. And I think that's it. So I'll just close this lesson by saying that I want you to remember to enjoy yourself when you get out there. There's definitely a learning curve to plein air painting, so try not to get frustrated if you're not turning out paintings that you're happy with right off the bat. I always tell everybody that it's not, you're never wasting paint. Anytime you put the paint out and you get the canvas out and you start painting, then it's going towards creating those paintings that you want to be creating. So I wouldn't even worry about making great paintings or even making good paintings as much as I would worry about just making paintings in the beginning, because essentially the good paintings will come, but they have to come through consistency and your enthusiasm. So and I think understanding that there is a learning curve and that you might not turn out a masterpiece your first several paintings, that understanding that can help keep the enthusiasm alive as you go. So paint things that you love, paint things that you're interested in. That'll keep you motivated to paint. And you can continue to watch the videos here. I'll be doing, trying to do one a week right now, so this is number 3. We'll do another one next week. And I've also started a new series called Art Musings, where I'll be doing some short little clips of just me talking about some ideas about art and painting and life in general. So I appreciate everybody that's watching the video. I see that you're out there. We've got lots of views on these previous videos, and we've gained a lot of subscribers, so it's really cool because I know that you guys are out there and we're benefiting from this. If you want to support the channel, I've got a couple links down in the description. We've got a Patreon page where you can go to and pledge a certain amount a month if you want to support that way. And then there's also 2 different links to my websites where you can purchase my artwork. So that's always another way to support the channel. We want to keep these videos free and available for everyone. So far so good. I think it's a good thing. I've gotten a lot of good feedback, and looking forward to sort of fine-tuning the videos. But check me out on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and click the bell to receive email notifications. And I think that's it. So we'll end with a little zoom in of the painting, and you can take some time to study the brushwork there if you want to pause it at the end. And I'll look forward to seeing you again. So thanks for watching.